Hodge, earlier in the evening we were talking about pass marks. What's a pass mark for the Brisbane Lions right now? Welcome to you.
Good morning, guys.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. How am I going? I am flustered, Kane. Kids were running right at home.
Yes.
They had sport after school, and then the two younger ones were just terrors. So I was actually more than happy to stay in here for a couple of hours over if that needs be. But,
early morning beach session for you for being late.
100%. If that gets me away from the kids, mate, I'll be more than happy to do it every morning this week. But a pass mark for the Lions, I had high hopes for them.
Yep.
I had them at the start of the year, tipped them to win the premiership.
Okay,
so,
you did too.
Knees were a little bit shaky at the start of the season with a couple inconsistent games, but I think with the people who they've picked up throughout the year, what they've been able to add to their side, and I think you saw it firsthand with Dunkley on Friday night against Carlton, took care of Cripps and just tore the game apart. So I think that's a pass mark. They've been top four for the last 4 years, and they've definitely got the soldiers to go on and win the flag in my eyes.
Pretty harsh when your pass mark is a premiership, but there's no question that their last couple of weeks they've consolidated as one of those top four.
Yeah. I guess expectations are high up here in Brisbane. They've been riding it for the last few years, but. They're a quality team, and we know what they're capable of, and I think that's where the difference is. What you saw with Carlton, I thought Carlton actually started the game really well on Friday night, but it was when Brisbane took it to the next level during the second quarter, third quarter, that's where Carlton fell short. Their top end talent isn't as good, and the pressure just got to them.
Hodgie, you played with Buddy clearly. What did you make of the booing of him and the apologies that have since come forward from Collingwood?
Pardon me, I thought well done to Collingwood for them to jump on the front foot. What they put out from the CEO, the coach, the captain, could not agree more. Where I understand football is an emotional, passionate game, and I can understand Rory Lobb going over to Fremantle and getting booed because he's left their club, and I can understand Horne-Francis against North. It's nothing about them as person. It's just more. It's the theatre of the game, as I think, Sammy, you said earlier. It's the passion of someone leaving your side. But when you got supporters that boo, Collingwood are booing Horne-Francis round two, and then them doing the same to Buddy on the weekend. Like, if Buddy went through and cleaned up one of their players early in the game, understand the emotional side of the things is to boo him. But he's done nothing to that team for people to sit in the stands. And I heard this morning with Gerard that someone compared it to Seth Curry having a free throw shot in basketball. If he's having a shot at goal, try and put him off. But booing him every time he gets it, I just think it's stupid. And surely we've gone past it. With the issues that they had with Goodsy up there years ago, it turned an absolute star off AFL. And if we're going to continue to do that to blokes like Buddy or Horne-Francis, blokes that just love playing football, getting booed for no reason, it's just quite silly in my opinion.
All right, more of your thoughts shortly. Nick Daicos, Jack Payne, Port Adelaide, all on your radars. We get into the 7 observations from round 8. Start with observation number 1. Ashcroft and Sheasel are great, but Matthias Phillipou, I think, has got the most upside. Athletic, 190 centimetres, massive left foot. He's powerful, he's quick. He sat on heads yesterday.
He did. Mm-hmm.
And he reminds me a little bit of, because of his frame, Bontempelli in his first year. He's not as skinny as Bontempelli, but there's Bontempelli traits about him. I think they're probably going to play different roles, and I'm not sure whether Matthias will be an
Did he play midfield as a boy?
I think he was more like high half forward, that power, or he would have played as a key forward, I guess, with his height in junior football. But just the upside for him, like what's he touching? 40% of his upside, Hodgie? I think he's untapped.
Anytime, pardon me, anytime you see a young midfielder who can adapt quickly, you can you sit back and go, geez, they're smart. They've got the footy IQ and their skills are top-notch in first touch. But what does excite you is when you've got someone who's got athleticism, 190 plus, who can play different positions. And early in his career as well, that the centre-half forwards, the tall half forwards can only really have an impact, or they play their best football when they're mid-20s to late 20s after they've had a number of years' experience learning their craft. So for someone to come in with that little experience and be able to have the impact, and as you said, he does a few things where you can sort of sit back and go, ooh, it catches your eye.
I just wonder on the back of Jordan Dawson's evolution from half back at about the same size into the middle, whether or not there is the possibility for him to become like the Bont.
I think it's untapped. I just think what he can do, and we may end up in 5 years going, oh, geez, Ashcroft and Sheasler are terrific. They're going to be 300-game players, but this guy is the match winner out of that draft, like Bontempelli.
I think if they picked any of those three, the coaches would be pretty happy to be putting their name on the whiteboard.
Josh Simkin did him a favour too for his top-end speed data when they get his little GPS unit. Just see that. Josh Simkin ripped his GPS unit out of his jumper and piffed it 30 metres down the field.
I didn't see
Top-end speed with 30 or 40 k an hour out of that.
Observation number 2. I know you did this game, Gerard, and maybe I lied. Maybe there is a Port Adelaide mention on here, but it's more directed at Essendon. Essendon's midfield can hang their heads in shame. They had Draper, Merritt, Shield, Parrish, Setterfield versus Teakle, Horne-Francis, who's played 20 games, Rosie, who's 22, 23, Butters the same, Drew and Wines, and they coughed up 18 shots to 10 from stoppages, even though the hit-outs to advantage was 18-7 in Essendon's favour. They started like a house on fire. I understand that out of centre bounce, I think it was 8-1 at one point. But
they dominated the centre bounce, but they got dominated around the ground.
And the experience of that midfield, that should be their strength with the names that I mentioned, with a dominant ruckman versus a guy who really probably shouldn't be playing AFL footy in Bryn Teakle, Hodgie.
Surely scores from stoppages go to your defensive end as well. Your setup, your structure from defensive end. Because if you lose a stoppage, that has to go through your defensive wing. It's got to go through your 6 defenders as well. So yes, you don't want to be losing stoppages, but it's not just the midfielders who give up those scores.
I think that's a fair point. Observation number 3. I loved what Sydney tried to do to Daicos. So there's different views, and I've heard different ones of it saying it didn't work. You can't tag him. He's untaggable. Look what it does to everyone else. I loved it. I've been calling for it, and I thought they executed it.
Did it work?
Pretty well. I think if you look at why Sydney lost that game, in the third quarter, from the 16-minute mark to the 11-minute mark, they had so much of the ball. They butchered the ball like you wouldn't believe. At one point, it was 1 goal, 8 from set shots. So you can highlight the Daicos stuff all you like.
Yep.
But that gave them an opportunity to be in the game. They clearly limited his influence. He had 25. Probably a lot of those came from kickouts. I'm not sure. Clark kicked 1 goal off him. I don't think you just chuck it out because you lost the game. Not many are going to beat Collingwood at the MCG.
No, I think the bigger issue for Sydney is not whether that worked or didn't work. It's the fact that the cohesion between the middle and the forwards has been horrible for too often this year.
Hodgie, I know you got some thoughts on that later, so just hold fire. Observation number 4. Round 8 emphasised the importance of top draft picks, and they're all coming through year 3, year 4, year 5. They're emerging into superstars, and they're all top 10 picks. Noah Anderson, best game he's played at AFL level. I reckon he was enormous, going head-to-head with Oliver and Petrarca. Rosie and Butters got the 10 and 6 coaches' votes in that game, both top 10 draft picks. What Tom Green did was amazing, really, head-to-head with Bontempelli and equal best on ground for him and his age. Luke Jackson as well, you could probably chuck that in as well. So those teams that are developing, get as many top 10 picks as you can and pick accurately. And in 4 or 5 years, you're going to have some superstar players on your books. And I thought that was highlighted with some of those performances. Observation number 5, and Hodgie's touched on Brisbane. They're a different team this year, and there's a couple of things I want to highlight. So Lachie Neale did an interview, and I know you're going to speak to him after 6:30 in the pre-season. They said, Lachie, how are you going to improve your game this year? He said, you know what, I want to run back and get better defensively with my positioning. It was nothing about touching the ball. It was nothing about kicking goals. It wasn't about winning best and fairest, All Australians, Brownlows. It was getting back and filling holes to make my defender's job easier. They get Dunkley, and what do they say about Dunkley? They said, Josh Dunkley's had the most smothers in the AFL in the last 4 years. We're excited about what he brings to us defensively. The job on Cripps that he did. Hadn't seen a Brisbane team do a job on the opposition's best player like that for a long time. Their forward half pressure, they kicked 85 points off turnover. 85. It's ridiculous. They spooked Fremantle last year in the same way. But the biggest thing that highlighted was the job on Sard, Hodgie. It wasn't one person. It was everyone. And he still had a bit of the ball, Sard, but every time he got free, there was a Brisbane player, McCarthy, it was Hipwood, it was Gunston, didn't matter who it was Charlie Cameron, that said, we're going to make life a little bit difficult for this guy. Have you seen that, Hodgie, in Brisbane's improvement this year?
Oh, without a doubt. I think one thing that lacked them down, and I said before that they've been top 4 the last 4 years, where they've fallen short in big finals is two-way running. Yes, they've got the blokes who can win the ball, but as you said then, if you've got a captain who's setting the standard, setting the example, saying, I don't care if I get the ball or not, and if you look through Lockie's stats, he's getting 20s, low 20s. Very rarely, there might have been 2 games this year where he's been leading stats getter for the Brisbane Lions, which shows that his focus has gone away from him getting the ball, sharing the load. So if it does come to finals time, he can have an impact defensively, and they're not relying on him just to win the ball. So another one that you've added to that is Jack Payne. Defensively, they brought in another Sunshine Coast fella who's did a very good job on Curnow. So it's definitely a clear focus that they've changed from the last few years.
Is he a better player than you anticipated him becoming, Hodgie?
No. When I first, because I got to Brisbane the same year as Jack Payne did, and he had all the attributes. He had speed. He was strong. 6'4". He was an athlete prior to playing football, so he didn't grow up with the I guess the upbringing of knowing and understanding football. So it's taken him a long time to understand that. But what it has happened this year is he's been able to play consistent games. Prior to this year, the most games he's played is 5. Last year he had patches of 3, then have a break, 4 have a break, 5 have a break. But at least this year with Marcus Adams out, they've given him a consistent time to go up there, and now you can see the confidence that he's playing with. And look, to keep a bloke who come off 9 goals to 1 in a game of footy he had a few looks at it. It was a pretty good effort.
Observation number 6, Mabior Chol is the luckiest man in football this week. I'm not sure if you saw the swinging arm on Bowie. The swinging arm copped him high. Tackle was ferocious. It was a bit ugly, yet no case to answer. And Van Rooyen gets 2 weeks for a nil-time spoil. So if you can look at it online, you can search it up, but Mabior Chol was very lucky to get off at the
He was
try.
unlucky not to get that free kick in a marking contest, though. How about a couple of those whistle swallows at the death there against the Suns? My goodness.
Weren't great. And finally, has anyone checked on Treaders?
I was wondering how long you'd give him.
Go on. Oh, is that it? That's just a mic drop.
I'm just wondering if anyone has checked on Warren. The Treadray curse is alive. I know you don't think it's a curse, Gerard. It's
a reverse curse.
It's a reverse curse. But since the untenable comments, Port Adelaide have gone 5 from 5. They've got North Melbourne this week, and I don't think it's untenable.
You might have had him in your mentions before, but Jeremy Finlayson, I mean, what a season. What an evolution of a role.
Fan.
What an evolution of a role that man is.
I thought it was a massive opportunity for every other club to miss out on this bloke who they were giving away. They were actually giving him away.
Yeah.
And so he's come through, and you say that the rucks and the midfield got dominated, and they should have dominated. But Finlayson changed it. He changed it almost single-handedly. He went in and he became another ground ball player, neutralised it, got a few clearances himself. A terrific player.
In defence of the other clubs, I think he was pretty keen to get as close to South Australia as he could for family reasons. So I think he identified Port Adelaide and they were the beneficiaries of that. Let's get to...
Has Treaders said much over there since?
I haven't. That's why I was wondering, Hodgie, if anyone's checked on him, because I haven't heard much from...
You're going to put out an APB?
He may end up being okay and they may end up moving on from Ken Hinkley.
Do you reckon everyone who he's seen for the last 5 weeks has just raised that to him about Ken Hinkley?
But he wasn't alone. Like, he had a lot of support kicking with the breeze from a lot of those Port Adelaide fans who have gone pretty quiet.
Yeah, but I understand that. But fans are one thing, but you're a premiership captain or former captain of that football club. You've got a little bit more pull than your odd spectator who's sitting at home and throwing out a grab on Twitter. He's gone out there and publicly stated this within 3 rounds.
3 rounds. That was the thing. There was the
that's not good, Kane.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'd even go that early, Hodgie. That was quite early for Warren. All right, Nick Daicos, I loved it. Hodgie, what was your thoughts on the tactic around going after him?
Yeah, well, I've same as yourself. I've been in clubs that have targeted really good players, young players, anyone who you think is going to have an impact for the opposition, and clearly Nick's got that target on his back because he's had such a great start to his career. And did it work? Yeah, well, he clearly didn't have the effect, but sometimes it's backfired with some of our teams as well. But when you've got blokes like Maynard on the other side, there's one thing, you look at that Collingwood team and they look like big brothers to that fella, to Nick Daicos. They look like anyone who's going to go and have a crack at him. I remember last year, he played up at the Gabba early on the lines. I don't think it was a target, but he made a mistake. They got a goal and a few of the Lions boys went at him. And Maynard and the likes went and stuck up for him. That's where it's the pros and the cons. Pros, you might be able to put the young fella off his game, but the con could be is you could lift that side because everyone else is trying to give him the ball. Then it brings the blokes who love that physical style of football into the game. And I think anyone who's played with Maynard or watching him play, that any time you're going to have a crack at one of his teammates, he's going to be first in there to stick up for him.
Loved it. Yeah. Did you sense that responsibility when you played, when someone was going after a younger teammate, to be the one in there to defend him?
We had a pretty senior group. So we had whether you're forward, mid or back, we had one or two solid guys there who would normally put their hand up to go and look after young fellas. And that's I think that's in any team. Anytime you see someone with a lot of potential that team's going to target, it's second nature as a senior person to go and look after them.
Gerard and I were having a chat off air where I'm not certain how good Port Adelaide are. What have you seen, Hodgie? They've won 5 in a row, but are they with the top echelon of teams? Are they a contender for top 4?
I don't think, watching them play, Kane, nothing jumps out of the screen as they're in the top 2, 3 or 4 in the stats, but they do a lot of things well. Defensively, they're sound, so they're in the top 6 or 7 defensively in a lot of the key areas that you look at that successful teams have had over the last few years. It's just something about them. So when you watch them play, they're coast-to-coast football. It's not always pretty. They can make mistakes, but they're a team that won't stop trying. They're a team that will... if they're down as we saw against Essendon, they'll continue to fight. They'll continue to come back. And you said they've found a few decent players. With you mentioned before about Finlayson, and then they've got that younger midfield that are just willing to try things.
Hey, Bergman's been good.
He's been really good. One of the big improvers, centre half, sort of half-back flank. His kicking is superb. He's got good height. Doesn't get brushed off anymore. He looks like he's put some weight on, and he's become He's solved a problem for them, because they did have a problem there, and they've actually created 2 pluses. Darcy Byrne-Jones has gone forward. Who's the young kid that they've brought in for that small defender?
Dylan Williams.
He had about 30 odd possessions on the weekend, so he's been a plus, and Bergman also has been a plus. So their backline is almost consolidated through youth.
Hey,
so
Sammy, sorry, Hodgie, just some breaking news from the tribunal before we get back to you, Sammy.
Yep, quickly. There's going to be a quartet of cases at the tribunal tomorrow night now, Kane, because Junior Rioli, we flagged it earlier, the incident that left Jordan Ridley concussed in the second quarter of that 5-point win for the Power. He's been sent directly there to the tribunal, Junior Rioli. So it's been assessed by the MRO, Michael Christian, as careless, which we knew, but severe impact and high contact. So that's a minimum 3-match ban. So Junior Rioli, the 4th name at the tribunal tomorrow night to argue his case. She's going to be a fair old marathon.
Severe out of that. It was almost a brush.
Yeah, but it left him concussed and it left him unable to continue. Now, I'm not privy to the medical report as it stands at the moment. He hasn't got a break, which I think was feared initially for Jordan Ridley. So maybe, Michael Christian giving some weight to the fact that it could have been a break, but it's not. But it's concussion, game-ending concussion, and it's been graded as severe, which is that 3-match trigger.
He was mucking around with his TMJ, the joint of the 2 jawbones. So I think that's why everyone thought he might have had a crack, but not so is the report. But it's a really tough one because it looked just accidental to me.
I can't see how they found that to be severe, but that's the times we live in. Hodgie, you wanted to speak about the Van Rooyen incident, which has been spoken about a lot. Would you be disappointed if he got 2 weeks for that?
Well, when you watch something like that, you try and put yourself in his position. What would you do? And I know that I've been in that position, running back with the flight of the ball. You can't take your eyes off the person and turn around and look, because you're going to miss time it, because you know it's a split second. So you try and read off the person who's about to mark the ball where the ball's going to be, and you try and time it like that. And we've seen a few players in the AFL have been able to do that, and they get a freaky spoil, and everyone pats them on the back and says, "Well done." I feel this one was an accident. Like, you look through it, what was his intent? Was his intent to go and hit him in the head? No, it wasn't. His intent was to try and time the ball. That's why his fist missed him, his forearm missed him, his bicep made contact with his head, and that can happen in a game of football. So I think if you wind it all back and look and say, what was his intent? His intent was to try and time the ball directly and spoil the ball. And in that action, he's made contact high, but it was an accident.
The AFL will argue it was excessive force in the circumstances, I suspect.
Yeah, I can understand what they're saying that, but if you're running back with the flight of the ball, if you go back and you're jogging, he'll stop, put you on the backside. No doubt you would have saw last week with Bont playing his 200th game, the amount of times that he put me on my backside in that final in 2016. I got reminded every day about it last week. But that's what happens. If you don't go back with intent, you can get put down if he stops and props. So he's gone back with momentum to try and time the ball and missed the ball clearly, but then it wasn't a fist, it wasn't a forearm, it was his bicep or tricep that made contact. And I understand that there was an issue with the injury, but I can understand why they'd be challenging this to try and fight on those.
I think most people would agree with you. What do we learn out of Richmond's game against West Coast, if anything, Hodgie?
Nothing. Nothing. Well, no, and this is nothing against Richmond. Like you can't take anything away from Richmond. They played a team who obviously started with a bit of momentum early, got a few goals. But if you go back and track against any team that sort of come up against West Coast, because of the side that they've been able to put on the park, you go through their injury list. No wonder why Adam Simpson's pulling his hair out. A lot of blokes there, you're sitting there going, would they be getting a game for anyone else? Probably not. They're just topping up their list because they've got so many injuries. Carlton beat them by 109 points. Kerno kicked 9 goals. Everyone in that side looked absolutely amazing. We're thinking, oh, here come Carlton. And then against the proper team, get beaten convincingly, even though on the scoreboard it was only 20-odd points. But the Kerno kicked 1. The midfield had no impact compared to what they did the week before. So I look at the Richmond, we got the game this Friday night, Richmond-Geelong. You can't really do any research on the Richmond side from this week because of the opposition they played.
Well, we were talking about Shea Bolton last week, and he bobbed up with 10. You were talking about Tim Taranto. He bobbed up with 7.
Yep.
Dion Prestia, he got plenty of public coverage this week, 7. Jacob Hopper, 2. Oscar Allen. I remember about 3 months ago we were talking about Oscar Allen. A lot of people came for us saying that he's a good player and has done nothing yet. Well, he's doing something in very tough circumstances right now. He's
22 goals he's kicked.
He's keeping that club alive just at the present time. And Dusty and Liam Baker also got 1 apiece. Have you reconsidered your Tim Taranto rating?
Hang on, Kane,
Yes.
did you say last year that maybe, did you reach out to Port to try and chase Hopper and Taranto? Was that thrown out somewhere that you may have made a comment that they should have chased those 2 players?
No, I was talking about the midfielders that Port Adelaide would have the opportunity to have a look at, because that's clearly an area that I thought they lacked depth, and I would still have Tim Taranto and Jacob Hopper in my midfield.
At what cost?
At what cost? Not for 4 first-round draft picks, and certainly not for 2
That's right.
7-year
I just
deals.
heard that and almost fell off my seat when I heard that you
No,
were
I've heard
keen on them, those
I've
guys
heard
last year.
a lot of people mentioning that as well, including Tony Shaw. And it's interesting that he went back and got some audio from 12 months ago. That may be the only research he's ever done, but it wasn't. The criticism wasn't. The criticism wasn't
Hang on.
at. Well, the criticism wasn't at. Should they get them? It was the cost that it has taken to get them. To
Future
the club.
future picks are dangerous. Hey, by the way, speaking of numbers, there's a lot of them on this MRO rap sheet as well, by the way. 9 players fined in that melee between Collingwood and Sydney yesterday.
What are the numbers?
Oh, all sorts, ranging from 1,500 up to 2,500 and such. I've actually wanted to ask, is it always the case, Hodgie, that the club pays that penalty, or is that onto the individual to fork out?
The club does not pay anything,
Club
mate. Not
doesn't
allowed
pay
to.
it.
Not a
As much
cent.
as you-
Soft cap
No.
these days.
So that's out of your pocket. So in all those
That's out of
times that you
pockets.
went after like Todd Goldstein and all those guys,
No, they were
and Andy
suspended.
Swallow,
They were suspended, not fines.
Is it pre-tax or after-tax? Hodgie?
That's after tax.
Okay.
Don't worry. You soon, once you've been up there a couple of times, and there's a few fines that out for melee and wrestling that the missus does realise that
They
the
add
bank
up.
account's
Yeah.
getting lighter and lighter. And
I'd reckon.
the wife's more intimidating than what the tribunal is. I can tell you
I've
that.
always laughed at people that say
Yeah.
fines have no impact. You got to suspend these players. I'm like, fines have an impact. Don't you worry about that. Fines don't hurt the players. They hurt. Yes, they hurt.
We had one back at Hawthorn early on. If you got into a melee for the right reasons or sticking up for someone, you'd split the fine. So everyone would tip in to split the fine. But if you went in there, so I reckon there was one. Jordan, it was Jared Roughhead and Buddy must have been getting picked on in their first year, and they were just and Jordan Lewis just went in there and started fighting. And he went in there with not to try and help anyone else out, but just to fight. So Louis had to pay his own, and the other guys had to share it.
Ouch.